Welcome to Listen and Sleep. Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle where it feels at rest. Your shoulders drop. Your breathing evens out. The day is already behind you. It asks nothing more of you now. Tonight, we begin a journey along one of the quietest paths a human being has ever walked. We continue our travels through ancient India, through its wisdom, its questions, its remarkable ability to see past the noise and into what lies beneath. Tonight, we turn to yoga, not the kind your eyes are used to. Something older, something that existed long before the mat. Imagine a morning, early. Somewhere in a city, the first light appears in a window, gray, trembling, still uncertain of itself. A floor creaks. Someone rises, stretches, finds a space in the middle of a room. A woman in tree pose, one leg reaching upward, hands folded above her head. Her face is focused, quiet. Outside, the world is slowly brightening. That is what most of us picture when we hear the word yoga. A mat unrolled on a wooden floor, a studio with glass walls and the scent of lavender. Warrior pose, lotus pose, downward dog. Breath counted out in measured beats. Flexibility as achievement. Health as the goal. All of that is true, and all of it is part of the path, but only part. The third step out of 8, and the first 2 are about something else entirely. 2,000 years ago, give or take, for history keeps this imprecisely, a certain sage did something remarkable. He gathered everything that had ever been said about yoga before him. Many schools, many voices, many competing ideas, and he distilled it all into one slender book. 196 short verses, each one like a seed. Almost no water, only essence. This sage was called Patanjali. Almost nothing is known about him. Not the year of his birth, not the place. Legends say one thing, scholars say another. But his book is known. The Yoga Sutras. It has outlasted millennia. And right at its beginning, in its very first lines, Patanjali offers a definition. Just 5 words in Sanskrit. Yogash chitta vritti nirodha. Speak them slowly if you wish. They sound like something ancient and yet somehow familiar. Yogash Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. Not a word about the body, not a word about flexibility, not a word about health or beauty. Only the mind, only what happens inside, not outside. Consider that for a moment. Everything we have come to call yoga, poses, breathing, studios, morning practices, is only one of 8 steps. The third step, and the first 2 are about how you treat the world and how you treat yourself. Patanjali described 8 steps, 8 gates, each one leading to the next. They are arranged with intention. First, the moral ground, then the body, then breath, then the senses, then the mind, and at the very end, something for which human language has almost no words. We will walk all 8, without hurrying, without skipping ahead, like a trail in the mountains, one step at a time, noticing what opens around us. The first part of the path is not about the body. It is about the one who chose to walk. Perhaps you already practice yoga. Perhaps you never have. It does not matter, because tonight we are speaking of yoga in the sense that Patanjali understood it, a sense that requires no mat, only attention, only the willingness to listen. Outside, night, breathing even, the thoughts of the day are still circling, but softer now, like dust after the door has been closed. A little longer, and they will settle. Close your eyes and let the first layer of disturbance fall still, the layer of daily thoughts. We are setting out along an ancient path, and its first stretch is not about the body. It is about the one who walked it first. Mist arrives in the mountains before dawn, before the birds, before the first smoke from a hearth. It drifts along the slopes in silence, like the breathing of someone asleep, covering everything: paths, stones, quiet trees. Imagine people sitting around a fire. The wood crackles. Somewhere in the distance, a river, and nearby, an old man. His face is still. He stares into the fire for a long time before he speaks. he is in no hurry. There is nowhere to rush. The night is long. He says, "There was a time when the paths began to disappear. Not all at once, gradually, the way a trail disappears when no one walks it anymore. The teachings had blurred into one another. Schools argued. Everyone spoke in their own voice, and in that chorus, what was real sank like a stone in dark water. Practices became rituals. Rituals became habit. And habit no longer remembered why. Something had to happen. According to legend, on the shores of a great celestial ocean, the god Vishnu rests. He reclines not on a bed or throne, but on a living being, a 1,000-headed serpent named Ananta Shesha. The word Ananta means infinite. Shesha means remainder, what is left after everything else has dissolved. He holds the weight of all the worlds within his coils, and he does so without effort, simply because that is his nature. And one day, Ananta Shesha descended. He became a human being, or nearly one. He was named Patanjali, and he came to support what was beginning to fall. As the serpent holds the worlds, so he came to hold the path. But there is another legend. The old man at the fire tells it more quietly, almost in a whisper. A woman named Gonika prayed for a long time, not for wealth, not for peace. She prayed for a teacher, for a son who could pass the light to others. One morning, she went to the river. She scooped water into her hands. She folded her palms together, like this, the way hands are joined in greeting. And into her cupped palms fell a tiny serpent, small, with a human face. That was him. His name was formed from 2 words, Pata, fallen, Anjali, folded palms, the gesture of receiving, the gesture of prayer. Patanjali, the one who fell into folded hands. Hold that image for a moment. Something high, something from another order of existence. And it falls downward, without shattering, without losing itself, simply taking another form, a form that can be received in open hands. Who was Patanjali, really? Almost no one knows. Scholars believe he lived somewhere between the 2nd century before the Common Era and the 4th century after. 6 centuries of uncertainty is a wide margin. Some believe several sages shared this name. Others believe one man wrote 3 great works: a treatise on grammar, a treatise on medicine, and the Sutras on yoga. 3 gifts to the world, 3 domains where a human being can become lost, in words, in the body, in the mind, speech, body, mind, and for each, a path. But it is the Sutras that endured, 196 short verses. Patanjali did not invent yoga from nothing. It existed long before him, in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, in the living transmission from teacher to student. He was not the creator. He was the gardener. A gardener does not plant a forest. The forest already exists, but a gardener clears a path through it, marks the trail, places signs, so that those who come after will not wander in the undergrowth, but walk without getting lost. That is what Patanjali did. In traditional iconography, he is depicted in a particular way. His upper half is human. His palms are folded in namaste, the same gesture his mother made. His lower half is a coil of serpent rings forming his base, and above his head, not a halo of light, but 1,000 cobra hoods spread open like an umbrella, like a crown. This is not merely an image. It is memory of who he was, earthly and celestial at once, received into open hands, and yet holding the worlds on his back. The old man falls silent. He gazes into the flame. The fire crackles. The mist has grown a little lighter, which means somewhere beyond the mountains, dawn is beginning. The name is almost gone. No face, no biography, only what he left behind. A thread stretched across the centuries. A book you can hold in your hands today and hear a voice that says almost nothing about itself, only about the path. That is how every ancient trail begins, with a person whose name is barely there, but a door he opened still stands, the first of 8. The door that Patanjali opened leads somewhere particular, not a mountain cave and not a throne room. a space where words are kept, where texts live. Imagine an old library, the kind where the air smells of time, of parchment, dried ink, wood darkened by many hands, a few candles, their flames almost motionless. In that quiet light, a book rests on a shelf, a very thin book. You can pick it up and feel surprised. It is light, almost weightless, not many pages, and yet something in it makes you reluctant to put it down. This is a collection of sutras. The word sutra in Sanskrit means thread, a fine thread, the kind from which fabric is woven, the kind that holds beads together while remaining nearly invisible. A sutra is a very short utterance, not a single unnecessary word, not a word for beauty's sake, only essence, only what is needed. It is not an essay and not a story. A sutra cannot be read the way you read a book, scanning the pages and closing the cover. A sutra must be unrolled, slowly, the way you unroll a scroll carefully with both hands, knowing the paper is fragile. Every word of a sutra is a seed. It is small. It fits in the palm of your hand, but inside it is an entire tree. Ancient teachers could speak about a single sutra for hours, then for days, write whole treatises about it, and still feel they had not said everything. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are built the same way. 196 verses, no more. They are divided into 4 parts. In Sanskrit, a part is called a pada. The first pada is samadhi pada, about concentration, about the nature of yoga. It is here, at the very beginning, that Patanjali speaks the definition from which everything flows. The second pada is sadhana pada, about practice. Here he describes the Ashtanga, the 8 steps. Here he names the kleshas, the 5 roots of suffering. Here practice takes shape, not abstract, but clear, step by step. The third pada is vibhuti pada, about powers, about the extraordinary capacities that arise in a practitioner. Patanjali does not hide them. He speaks of them openly, and then, immediately, he warns. These powers are beautiful. and they are an obstacle, the most subtle, the most seductive. The fourth pada is Kaivalya pada, about liberation, about what remains when everything superfluous has dissolved, about the space that neither arises nor disappears, about what has always been here. 4 padas, like 4 steps of one staircase, or 4 doors in one room. Each opens only after the previous one, or so it seems. Bring the candle closer. Here is the first verse, very short. Atha Yoga Anushasanam. In translation, and now the teaching of yoga. Just one word, atha, and now, thus, and already something important lives inside it. It says, you are ready. Everything else has come before. Now, listen. The second verse, the famous one, Yogash Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Say it slowly, silently to yourself. Yogash Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. 5 words, not one of them unnecessary. The third verse follows immediately. Tadda drashtu svarupe avasthanam. Then the seer abides in his own nature. When the fluctuations cease, the seer returns to himself, to what he has always been. And the fourth verse completes the thought. Vritti sarupyam itaratra. At other times, identification with the fluctuations. When the mind is disturbed, you believe that you are those waves. 4 verses. And all of yoga is already here, already said. The remaining 192 are only the unfolding of this seed. Patanjali speaks plainly. He does not complicate. He does not conceal. If you are not your thoughts, who are you? If you are identified with them, unable to observe them from a distance, you become them. You become each wave. Anxiety, hope, memory, fear. They arrive, and you go with them. But if you know how to observe, something remains, something still, something that watches. Patanjali calls it drashtu, the seer, not the seeing, not the image, but the one who sees. The candles in that imagined library are nearly burned out. The parchment smells sharper now, warmed by the flame. The book lies open, just a few pages. slender. It can be read in an hour, unhurriedly, almost under your breath, listening to each word. 1 hour, and it is finished. But you can spend a lifetime unrolling it. What, then, is the mind whose fluctuations must be stilled? Imagine a lake at dawn, early, nearly night still. The air has not yet decided what to become. No wind, not the slightest movement, and the surface of the water like glass, like a mirror watching the sky. You stand at the shore. You see clouds reflected in the water. You see the first rows of light at the horizon. You see yourself. And then a swallow. It carves an arc over the water. One moment, one brush of a wing against the surface. And that is all. Circles. One, then another, then a third. Spreading, crossing, layering. The sky's reflection disappears. Instead, ripples. That is what Patanjali means when he speaks the word chitta. Chitta is not simply thoughts. It is the totality of all that is within. An ocean whose surface we see every day, but whose depths we rarely notice. In this ocean, there are 3 layers. The first is manas, the perceiving, gathering mind. It takes everything that arrives from outside, sounds, images, sensations. It absorbs, sorts, carries further. Manas is the gatekeeper, always open. The second layer is buddhi, the discriminating intellect, the capacity to distinguish. This is this, and that is not that. Good and bad, real and imagined, lasting and passing. Buddhi is the one who decides. The third is ahamkara, literally the I maker. That which says, I see, I think, I did this. That which claims each experience and writes on it, mine. Ahamkara is the one who signs its name to every moment. All 3 together. That is chitta, not one mind, but an entire world within. Complex, layered, ceaselessly moving. And this movement Patanjali calls vritti. Vritti, fluctuation, a ripple, a wave. Any movement inside chitta, any change on its surface, that is vritti. A thought, vritti. A memory, vritti, a doubt, vritti, even sleep. Nirodha, the third word from that brief formula. Nirodha is stilling, cessation, but not suppression, not a fight, not a dam built against a river, more like what happens to waves when the wind falls silent on its own. Patanjali names 5 kinds of vritti, 5 kinds of fluctuations that live inside chitta. The first is pramana, correct knowledge, what we come to know accurately, without error. It has 3 sources. Direct perception, what you see, hear, feel yourself. Inference, what you arrive at through reasoning. And testimony, the word of someone you trust. Pramana is when knowledge aligns with what is. The second is vipariyya, incorrect knowledge, a misperception. You see a rope in the dark and mistake it for a snake. The fear has already risen. The heart has already quickened. Chitta is already moving, though there was never a snake. Vipariyya is when what does not exist governs you as powerfully as what does. The third is vikalpa, imagination, words that have no real object behind them. Eternity, happiness, the self. We say these words and see something behind them. But what exactly? Patanjali says, vikalpa is when the mind builds a world out of sounds attached to nothing. Not good and not bad, simply movement. The fourth is nidra, dreamless sleep. Here Patanjali makes an observation that stops you. Even sleep is vritti. Even that deep sleep in which there are no images, no thoughts, no anything, is not the silence he means. Because in the morning you say, I slept well, which means something new, something experienced. The mind did not stop. It simply descended into another state. The fifth is smriti, memory. Everything lived, left inside chitta as a trace. The smell of childhood, the voice of someone long gone, the grip of a fear that tightens somewhere in the chest for no visible reason. Memory is always the vibration of the past in the present. 5 kinds, and none of them are enemies. Patanjali does not say, destroy them. He says, still them. Because as long as they move, the lake does not reflect the sky. As long as vritti stir, you see only ripples, not yourself, not the sky, only ripples. What remains when the waves fall quiet? Patanjali answers in one of his first verses. Then the seer abides in his own nature. When the fluctuations cease, you are visible to yourself, not to who you appear to be, not the role, not the name, not the fears, to what is real. That state is not emptiness, not unconsciousness, not sleep. It is stillness in which you are fully present, completely, without loss. How does one arrive there? Patanjali names 2 words: abhyasa, consistent practice, continuous, long-sustained, and faithful. Not once, but again and again, and vairagya, non-attachment, the ability to let go, not to cling to what brings pleasure, not to flee from what brings pain. 2 wings. Without one, you cannot fly. Abhyasa and vairagya. Act and release. Walk and do not hold the road. This is not a contradiction. It is balance. Perhaps you have noticed this yourself. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, the surface inside suddenly calms, briefly, for just a moment. And in that moment, something is there, something difficult to name, but easy to recognize. Patanjali says, this is not accident. This is nature, your nature, the one that was always there beneath the waves. The mind is not an enemy. It is an instrument, a fine, complex, remarkable instrument. Yoga is not against it. Yoga is for the silence beneath it. But before the silence comes, you need to understand what raises the waves, what touches the surface again and again, what creates the ripples, the causes of suffering, the kleshas. Imagine an old tree at the edge of a clearing, standing in silence, its canopy spread wide, leaves rustling, branches reaching toward light. The trunk looks calm, unshakable. But if you lower your gaze down to where the earth receives the tree, something else appears. Roots, reaching deep into the dark, into moisture, into the pressure of stones. the tree holds not by its branches. It holds by what cannot be seen. Klesha. In Sanskrit, this word means a coloring, a taint. Not dirt on the outside, but a clouding from within. Like silt stirred from the bottom when the water is disturbed. Patanjali says, the fluctuations of the mind have a cause, and there are 5 of these causes, 5 kleshas, 5 roots that we cannot see, but that hold everything in place. They are not equal to one another. They do not stand side by side. They grow from one another like branches of a single tree. And this tree has one deep root. Avidya, ignorance. Patanjali names it first and deepest, not ignorance of facts, not lack of education. Avidya is a structural error of perception, deep, invisible, habitual. We take the impermanent for the permanent. We take what will change for what will last forever. We take pain for happiness when it is dressed as pleasure. We take what we are not for what we are. This is not stupidity. It is like vision that has long grown accustomed to a warped lens. You no longer notice the distortion. It seems normal. And that is precisely why avidya is the root. Everything else grows from it. From avidya comes asmita, often translated as I amness, the identification of the seer with the instruments of seeing. You look through the body and say, I am this body. You think through thoughts and say, I am these thoughts. You play a role and say, I am this role. That is asmita. Patanjali says, this is a mistake, but a mistake so habitual that it sounds like truth. Every time you say I, you are already a little inside asmita, and yet that is not you. Imagine a lantern. The lantern lights the road, but the lantern is not the one who walks. The light sees the path, but the light is not the traveler. Asmita is when the lantern forgets the difference. From asmita grows raga, attraction, yearning toward what once brought pleasure. The memory of sweetness pulls again and again. Raga in itself is not evil. It is a natural movement of life. But Patanjali observes, when attraction becomes a chain, when you can no longer help but reach, this is an obscuration. You believe you want this thing, but perhaps it is only the trace of an old pleasure dragging you forward. After attraction comes dvesha, aversion, a pushing away from what once caused pain. The memory of bitterness makes you withdraw before you have even had a chance to feel. Dvesha is also a chain, but it pulls not toward, it pulls away. Raga and dvesha are two ends of one rope, one pulling forward, one pulling back, and you between them, swinging, calling it life. And finally, abhinivesha, clinging to life, the fear of death, the darkest of the 5 roots, the most ancient. Patanjali speaks of it with rare gentleness. This fear exists even in the wise, even in those who have understood much. It is woven in deep, deeper than thoughts, deeper than memory. It flows through every living being the way blood flows. It cannot be torn out by a single act of will. It can only be recognized, seen, and not allowed to fill the entire horizon. Look at these 5. Avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Ignorance, self-identification, attraction, aversion, fear. They are not sins. Patanjali does not condemn. He does not call them vices or weaknesses of character. He calls them mechanisms, ways in which the mind organizes its existence. They operate in everyone, in the wise and in the beginner, in those who have meditated for years, and those who are hearing this word for the first time. To recognize them is already half the work. Not to fix, not to destroy. First, simply to see. There is an image that helps. Imagine you are removing layers, layer by layer, like clothing accumulated over a long winter. You remove raga, the pull drawing you in one direction, and beneath it you find dvesha, the repulsion pulling in another. You remove dvesha, and beneath it asmita, a thin, almost invisible conviction that you are what you think you are. You remove asmita, and there, avidya, the root, the very obscuration from which everything else has grown. Only when you have reached the root does the real work begin. Patanjali does not say, tear out the root. He says, loosen it, soften the soil, let light into where there was none. The kleshas do not diminish through struggle. They diminish through clarity, through practice, through the path. And that path has 8 steps. Patanjali offers it not as a list of rules, not as a list of prohibitions, as a sequential working with the one who works, with yourself, not the body, not the thoughts, with the one behind all of it who watches. 8 steps, 8 gates. Behind the first 3, the body. Behind the next 3, the mind. Behind the last 2, what cannot be described in words. We begin with the first. Early morning smells of damp earth and smoke. Somewhere in the distance, birds are singing, their voices soft, drowsy, as if they themselves have not yet decided whether the day has arrived. A student walks along a narrow path toward a village temple. The grass on either side glistens with dew, wet stone underfoot. He is hurrying, though he need not hurry. The teacher is always there. The teacher sits at the entrance, in silence. When the student approaches, the old man does not look at him. He reaches out and takes a clay cup from a low table. He holds it out. The student receives it. The cup is empty. The student looks at it, raises his gaze. The teacher says only this: as long as the inner vessel is not clean, any water poured into it will spill. Nothing more. Nothing more is needed. This is the first step. Yama, restraint, containment. The word Yama in Sanskrit means a rein, a bridle, that which stops movement toward what it should not go toward. Patanjali calls it Mahavrata, the great vow. A vow that does not depend on time, place, or circumstance. Not I will be honest only with those I love, or only when I am not tired. Everywhere, always. 5 yamas, 5 forms of restraint. Not rules and not prohibitions. 5 ways of cleaning the vessel before something real can enter it. The first is ahimsa, non-violence. Do not cause harm, not in deed, not in word, not in thought. This is the widest definition. It encompasses hands, speech, and everything that happens in the depths before it becomes word or action. Patanjali says, in the presence of one who is truly established in ahimsa, all enmity ceases. Even wild animals become gentle near such a person. Whether this is legend or observation, each person may decide for themselves. The second is satya, truthfulness. Do not lie, not to others, not to yourself, not through silence. But Patanjali adds something important. Speak the truth in a way that brings benefit. A word can be true and still be cruel. Satya without ahimsa is a knife offered as a gift. Truth lives inside the first restraint, like a smaller vessel within a larger one. The third is asteya, literally non-stealing, non-appropriating. Do not take what has not been given. But this is broader than it seems. Not only objects, the time of others taken without asking, attention captured without consent, idas claimed without acknowledgement. Asteya is a subtle respect for what belongs to another. Patanjali promises, one who is established in asteya, all treasures find their way to him. The fourth is brahmacharya, often translated as celibacy, but literally it means walking in Brahman, in the absolute, in the source. This word is often understood too narrowly. Yes, it includes sexual restraint. But deeper, it is about the direction of all energy. Where does your strength go? Outward, scattering in small things, or upward, gathering into something greater? Brahmacharya is not suppression. It is direction. The fifth is aparigraha, non-grasping. Do not take more than is needed. Do not hoard. Do not cling to possessions, to roles, to images of yourself. The less you carry, the more freely you walk. Patanjali says something remarkable. One who is established in aparigraha begins to understand the causes of his past and future births. Release from accumulation opens something, not outside, but in the very depths of memory. Here they are, the 5 yamas, 5 restraints. But before moving forward, something important must be understood. The yamas are not a list of prohibitions, not a code of do-nots. Patanjali sees them differently. This is the clearing of the field. If you continue to cause harm, the mind will remain restless, not because you will be punished, but because every action, every word, every thought directed toward destruction leaves a trace inside. The mind cannot be calm if it houses violence. If you lie, the mind splits. It must hold the lie and the truth at once. Two versions simultaneously. That is an effort, quiet, invisible, but constant. If you covet what belongs to another, the mind is occupied with calculation. What to take, how to take it, whether to justify oneself. And in that constant noise, nothing subtle can be heard. Yama is not morality for morality's sake. It is preparation, an empty vessel into which water can be poured. If the vessel is soiled, the purest water will turn murky before you raise it to your lips. Imagine someone who sits down to meditate, but who has just shouted at another person, or lied, or taken something without asking. The body sits, but the mind is in convulsions. It is digesting, justifying, blaming, building and demolishing. Silence cannot come to a place where there is no room for it. That is why Yama is the first step. Before the body, before the breath, before the pose, before anything else, look at how you touch the world around you. The morning light brightens slowly over the village. The student is still holding the cup in both hands. Now it no longer feels empty. It feels ready. The first gate requires no sitting posture. It requires looking at yourself, at how you touch the world. The second gate, Niyama, is about how you touch yourself. Evening arrived quietly, without announcing itself. Simply, the light grew softer, the shadows longer, the air a degree cooler, as if someone had turned down a great lamp above the horizon. The student was returning to the teacher along the same path as that morning. But now, in his hands, was that same cup, clean. He had washed it carefully, removed every trace of earth, rinsed it 3 times, set it to dry in the sun. He carried it gently, the way you carry something fragile. The teacher waited by the hearth. When the student held out the cup, the old man took it in silence. He smelled the clay, touched the rim with one finger, nodded, then picked up a jug and poured in milk. The student watched with anticipation. The milk began to curdle. Right there, in plain sight, in fine threads, barely visible. The cup was warm, not yet cooled from the day, still holding the heat of noon in its clay. The teacher set down the jug. He said quietly, "To clean it is not enough. You must also keep it cool." Niyama. The word means observance. If the yamas are about what not to touch, the niyamas are about how to treat yourself. The 5 yamas looked outward at your relationship with the world. The 5 niyamas look inward at what happens in silence when no one is watching. The first is shaucha, cleanliness, and it begins with the simple: the body, clothing, what you eat, where you live. That is the first circle. Tangible, familiar. But Patanjali does not stop there. The second circle is subtler. Thoughts, feelings, motives hiding behind words, envy dressed as care, a hunger for control in the costume of a desire to help. Patanjali says simply, one who is established in shaucha loses attachment to their body and to the bodies of others. The body stops being the main thing. This sounds strange, but the meaning is plain. When the inner is clean, the outer no longer consumes all attention. The second niyama is santosha, contentment, satisfaction with what is present right now. Not indifference, not resignation through gritted teeth. An inner peace that does not shatter when something goes wrong. From santosha, says Patanjali, arises the highest happiness. Not from achievement, not from acquisition, from peace with what already is. Imagine someone who has spent their whole life searching for something more. The next job, the next city, the next experience. They are never satisfied, not because life is poor, but because satisfaction is always somewhere ahead, just around the bend. Santosha is when you understand peace is here, not later, right now, in this room, in this evening, in this breath. The third niyama is tapas. The word is often translated as heat, fire, austerity. But it is not about pain, not about deprivation for its own sake. Tapas is the inner fire that helps you endure discomfort for the sake of something larger. The cold at dawn, when the body wants to stay under the blanket, but you go to practice. Silence when you want to speak. Fasting when the body asks for the familiar. Tapas does not break. It tempers. As metal passed through, fire becomes stronger. So the mind passed through tapas develops a steadiness it did not have before. The fourth niyama is svadhyaya, self-study. This word is made of two parts: sva, self, one's own, and adhyaya, study, reading, to read sacred texts, to repeat a mantra, but deeper, to observe yourself, to watch how irritation arises, how fear comes, how the mind draws conclusions without checking. Svadhyaya is an honest gaze inward, without self-flagellation, but without self-justification either. Knowledge that gradually becomes recognition. Not I read about this, but I see this right now in myself. The fifth niyama is Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to Ishvara, to God, to the highest. Patanjali does not insist on a specific image. Ishvara in the Sutras is more a principle than a person, a special form of consciousness, untouched by kleshas, unaffected by karma, unbound by time, something that is larger. And the act of surrendering yourself to this larger thing, releasing your own will, your own calculations, your desire to control the outcome. Patanjali makes a remarkable claim. Through Ishvara Pranidhana alone, samadhi can be attained. This is a hidden gate for those who have grown weary of effort, for those in whom love is greater than willpower. Yamas and niyamas together. 10 observances. The first 5 concern the way you relate to the world. The second 5 concern the way you relate to yourself. Together, they form the foundation, not the frame of practice. Practice itself. Without them, a body in a pose is just a body in a pose. Whatever you like, beautiful, skilled, flexible, but empty. With them, already a temple. Something is already happening inside. Many people think yoga begins with the body. With a mat under the arm, classes 3 times a week. Patanjali, if asked, would perhaps have smiled and said, "Start with not lying, not to others, not to yourself. Start with not taking what belongs to another, and being content, and looking inward. And when that becomes natural, then sit. Then the pose will mean something, because the one who sits will already be different." The teacher took the curdled milk and poured it onto the earth beside the hearth, rinsed the cup with cold water, set it to cool in the shade. He said to the student, "Come in the morning. We will speak about the body." 2 steps have been walked. Outside, the silence of the village, the smell of smoke, the distant voices of children. Inside, something settling slowly, the way water in a still vessel takes the shape of the vessel. The vessel is clean, cool, ready. Now we can speak of how to hold it, of posture, of the body. The 3rd step waits ahead. Asana. A stone platform beside a river. Early morning, when the light is not yet light, only the promise of it. Water moves past in silence, unhurried, like a thought that has run out of words. A yogi sits motionless. He sat here yesterday, and the day before, perhaps for years. From a nearby tree, blossoms have fallen, white, with a delicate scent of milk and honey. They have settled around him in a ring, as if the earth itself has drawn the boundary of his stillness. 2 birds built a nest in the crack of a stone 3 steps away. They are no longer afraid. They arrive with threads in their beaks, with blades of grass, with down. They are settling in nearby, as if they know, here is safety. Here nothing will disturb. He sits, simply sits. That is asana, the 3rd step, the one about which Patanjali wrote only a single verse. 1. In hundreds of verses about silence and the mind, about the causes of suffering and the paths to freedom, just 1 verse about the body. And that verse is as brief as an exhale. Sthira sukham asanam. The posture must be steady and comfortable. 2 words. Sthira, steady. Sukha, ease, comfort, sweetness. Notice what is not here. No complexity, no pain, no struggle, no overcoming. only steadiness, only ease. Today the word asana covers hundreds of forms: extended, twisted, inverted, balancing. Entire schools, traditions, styles. But Patanjali is speaking of a different asana. He is speaking of a posture for sitting for a long time, for sitting so long that the body forgets itself. Padmasana, the lotus posture. Siddha asana, the posture of perfection. Sukha asana, the comfortable posture. Not the 84 postures that Hatha Yoga would later describe. That is a separate and vast path. In Patanjali, one posture, the one in which you can sit for hours and not think about the body. How is such a posture achieved? How does the body stop being an obstacle? Patanjali answers in Sanskrit, Prayatna Shaithilya Ananta Samapatibhyam. Through the relaxation of effort and absorption into the infinite. 2 movements. Release the tension and dissolve into what has no boundary. Not reaching, not holding, not striving, releasing and dissolving. When the body is no longer the object of attention, it stops existing, not disappearing, simply withdrawing from the foreground. The way the sound of wind withdraws into silence when you grow used to it. It is still there, but you no longer hear it. Only the one who sits remains. Imagine that feeling. No need to seek it right now. Simply imagine you are sitting, and gradually, slowly, the way evening light withdraws from water, the body steps back. The hands are no longer hands. The legs are no longer legs. There is only a silence that has a shape, still, steady, comfortable. That is Patanjali's asana. The birds in their nest stir. One lifts off, returns, brings something soft. The yogi does not move. The circle of blossoms still lies around him, undisturbed. After asana comes pranayama, the 4th step of the Ashtanga. Prana, the life force, that energy which moves through everything living. Breath is only its surface, its most visible layer. The way wind is the visible layer of air in motion. But deeper, beneath it, the air itself, which does not move, which simply is. pranayama in the sutras is not a collection of techniques, not a counting of breaths, not rhythms and exercises. Patanjali says it more simply and more deeply. It is the interruption of the movement of inhalation and exhalation, a pause, kumbhaka, the natural holding the breath, the kind that arises on its own when the mind is sufficiently still, not forced, not commanded by the will, on its own, like the pause between two waves, when the first has gone and the second has not yet come. There is a moment, weightless, without movement, neither in nor out, only presence. Patanjali distinguishes 4 forms of pranayama. The first, external, after the exhale, before the inhale. The lungs are empty. A moment of silence. The second, internal, after the inhale, before the exhale. The lungs are full. A moment of fullness. The third, retention at any point. Not outside, not inside, somewhere between, where there is no name. And the fourth form goes beyond the first 3. Patanjali names it separately, distinctly. It is the pranayama that cannot be performed. It can only be allowed. When the breath stops by itself, because the mind has stilled. Not held, stopped. On its own, the way water grows still in a quiet pool where there is no current and no wind. This is not frightening. This is the state in which monks have sat for hours, in which a practitioner suddenly notices they do not know when they last breathed. And this is not an absence. This is presence without effort. Feel right now how you are breathing. Do not change it. Only notice. There is an inhale. It arrives. There is an exhale. It departs. And between them, something else, very small, almost imperceptible, a pause in which neither is present. That is where Patanjali is pointing. It is worth noting, everything that would later come to be called Hatha Yoga, the vast path through the body, through breathing techniques, through channels and centers, through locks and gestures, all of it grows from this seed. But Patanjali barely touches this ground. 1 verse on asana, a few on pranayama, because his subject is not the body. His subject is the mind, and the body and the breath are only the platform, a steady and comfortable platform from which you look inward. The river moves. The blossoms lie in the dust of the platform, undisturbed. The birds have settled into the nest and grown quiet. The yogi sits. The body sits. The breath grows still. That particular silence arrives in which something begins to hear itself. And now it is time to go inward. The next step calls to the place where the windows close, pratyahara, but that is further on, behind the next door. Imagine a house with 10 windows, all open wide. From the street, everything pours in at once. Voices, the creak of wheels, the smell of food, laughter, the hum of wind, shadows flickering across the floor. The owner stands in the middle of the room and cannot hear their own thought. They are not angry. They simply rise and go to the first window, close it, then to the second, then the third, one by one, without hurrying, as if this is the most important thing they will do today. And when the last 10th window is closed, the house falls silent. For the first time all day, the owner hears the ticking of a clock. It was here all along. The street had simply drowned it out. This is pratyahara, the 5th step. Its name in Sanskrit means literally withdrawal, a drawing back of the senses from the objects to which they have adhered. Patanjali calls the senses of perception jnana indriyas. There are 5: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. Each one like a window, 5 windows constantly thrown open to the world. In ordinary life, they face outward. The eyes reach toward form, toward color, toward movement. The ears reach toward sound. The skin seeks contact. And with them, the mind moves. Where the senses go, the mind follows. They lead it the way a leash leads a dog, or more precisely, the way a dog pulls the leash. The mind is scattered among 10 directions. It cannot gather itself because something is always pulling it elsewhere. Pratyahara is when the mind begins to call the senses back, not commanding them, not forcing them, not plugging the ears and squeezing the eyes shut, simply not following. A sound arrives. The mind notices and does not go after it. This is a subtle difference, not a fight with the world, not indifference, simply a different choice to remain where you are. Patanjali describes it this way: when the senses, withdrawn from their objects, seem to follow the very nature of the mind itself. That is pratyahara, not the mind reaching toward the senses returning to the mind on their own, as if they have remembered who their master is. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is an image that Patanjali most likely knew by heart: a tortoise pulling its limbs under its shell, not severing them, not hiding them forever, simply withdrawing them into stillness to wait out the storm. The senses do not die, they rest. They are inside. Pratyahara holds a particular place in the system of 8 steps. It is the boundary. Before it stand the outer practices: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama. These are called Bahiranga, what is outside. They work with the body, with behavior, with breath, with life among people. After pratyahara, a different shore begins: dharana, dhyana, samadhi. These are called antaranga, what is inside. They work with the mind itself, with pure attention, with what has neither smell nor color. Pratyahara is the door between them, the threshold, a crossing that cannot be forced or skipped. Why is this so difficult now? Because the entire modern world is arranged in precisely the opposite way. From childhood, we are taught to open windows, all of them, all at once. Music plays in the background while we eat. Images flash on a screen while we think. In our hands, a phone, simply because the hand is empty. On our skin, clothing that itches somewhere. In our nose, the smell of coffee from the next room. The mind grows accustomed to noise. Silence becomes unfamiliar, almost unsettling. When you remove one source of stimulation, the mind begins searching for another. This is not weakness. It is a habit built over years. Pratyahara does not begin on a mat. It begins in small decisions, not turning something on in the background when it is not needed, not scrolling without reason, not reading while eating, sitting in silence, simply sitting. Close one window, just one. That already is practice. When you close the second, you notice how loud the first was. When you close the third, you realize how long it has been since you heard yourself. And gradually, the house begins to speak from within. The ticking of the clock that was always there. This is not yet silence. This is only its forerunner, only the first layer. Beneath it, another, still deeper. But you cannot reach the depths without passing through the surface. You cannot step inside without closing the door. Pratyahara is a closed door. The street stays outside. Inside, the house, quiet, alive. And here is where the real question begins. Where do you look now that the street is no longer visible? The windows are closed. The sounds of the street fade behind the walls. But inside the house, there is still noise. Your own, long accumulated. And now, one thing becomes important: where to direct your gaze. The next step is dharana, undivided attention. In a still room stands a lamp. The flame reaches upward in a clean column. It does not waver. It does not search for anything. It simply rises, the way fire always rises, toward its sky. Imagine this room. The windows are closed. No draft, no rustling. Only this quiet, vertical flame. It does not struggle. It simply is. And in that simply is the entire essence of the next step. The sixth step, dharana, holding the mind on a single object, one point, and all the mind on it. Patanjali said this briefly. One verse, Desha bandhas chittasya dharana. Desha, a place, a point in space. Bandha, a bond, a holding, a tether. Chitta, the mind, in all its complex depth. Dharana is when chitta is bound to one place. It does not wander. It does not fly after the first impulse. It stands like this flame. But which place? Patanjali gives no single answer, and this matters. Perhaps the tip of the nose, perhaps the point between the eyebrows, where all paths are said to converge. Perhaps the heart center, the space in the middle of the chest where something warm and silent resides. Perhaps the sound of a mantra repeating inside, like an echo in an empty temple. Perhaps an image, a flame, a flower, a face, perhaps the breath itself. The choice remains with the one who practices. Patanjali does not impose a point. He points to a principle, one, only one, and the mind on it. Now the most important thing. At this step, the mind is not calm. Do not think that dharana is silence. It is not. The mind still jumps. It gets distracted. It wanders. It remembers. It makes plans. It notices a sound through the wall. It invents something unnecessary. The difference is one thing. Now it returns. It went away. You bring it back. It was distracted. Return to the point. It drifted off. Guide it back again. Again and again. Again and again. Like a dog that was used to running wherever it pleased. Now, a leash. Not a harsh one, no sudden jerks. Simply return. Calm, patient, without anger at yourself. That is the entire practice of dharana. Go and return. Go and return. 1,000 times in 1 hour. 10,000 times in a month. And here, something remarkable opens. There is an image that Patanjali, it seems, understood better than many words. Drops of water falling onto one point of stone. One drop fell, and nothing. The stone has not changed. A second drop, and again, nothing. The 100th drop, still nothing visible. But 1,000 drops leave a mark, small, barely perceptible, and 1,000,000 drops falling on the same spot bore through the stone entirely. So with the mind, one return to the point does nothing. 100 returns, barely noticeable. But years of such practice, patient, without expectation, without demand, gradually change the very nature of the mind. It begins to flow there on its own. First, it had to be dragged, then only guided. Then it finds its own way. Dharana is not meditation. This must be understood clearly. It is not yet dhyana, which comes later. It is dhyana's foundation, its preparation, its long and patient groundwork. The way soil is turned long before seed is sown. The soil does not see the fruit. But without the soil, there will be no fruit. Patanjali says this in one verse, and years of practice inside it. There is one more quality of dharana that is rarely spoken of. It purifies away expectation. When a person begins to practice, they wait. They wait for something to happen, for a special state to arrive, for the mind to suddenly fall quiet, for light, for silence, for a feeling of something extraordinary. They wait for reward in exchange for effort. Dharana gradually washes this expectation away, because at this step there is nothing but returning. Went away, returned. Went away, returned. And at some point, the person notices they are no longer waiting for anything special. They are simply returning. And that returning has itself become the practice, in itself enough. Perhaps this is one of the quietest discoveries on the path, that it is enough to simply do it, without decoration, without a horizon, simply, again, to the point. The image of the lamp returns, not because it must be memorized, but because it lives in the very heart of this step. Chitta, the mind, must become such a lamp, unshaking, even, rising toward its sky, not because it was forced to, but because there is no more wind. The windows are closed. The outer world has stayed outside. Pratyahara has done its work. And now, only this flame, only this point, only this quiet, steady beam of attention. Notice, you are already doing something like this right now. You are lying here. You are listening. Perhaps thoughts have wandered and returned. Perhaps you noticed that and listened again. This is a small, very small reflection of dharana. Not yet a step, but the direction, the same. When the returnings become fewer, when the mind holds on its own almost without effort. When the point stops being a point and becomes an entire world, something changes. Something new begins. Dhyana, what in English we call meditation. But about that, further on. Dhyana, the seventh step, the one that begins where returning ends, when the mind stops leaving. Imagine two vessels. One is filled with oil, clear, transparent, warm. You tilt it, and the oil begins to flow into the other, slowly, evenly, without a single bubble, without interruption, one continuous stream from edge to edge. This is what is called dhyana, not a metaphor. This is the exact image that the ancient text chose. A flow without break. Patanjali formulated it in one line. Tatra pratyaya ekatanata dhyanam. There, the uninterrupted flow of one content of consciousness. That is dhyana. He wasted no words adorning this thought. Only one thread, one stream, without a single break. It might seem, how is this different from what came before? You just learned about dharana, the sixth step, about the mind returning again and again to one point. Isn't that the same? No. The difference exists, and it is essential. In dharana, there is effort, almost imperceptible, but it is there. The mind went away. You brought it back. The mind went again. You brought it back again. Like a thread pulled back through the eye of a needle. Again and again. Each time, a small act of will. In dhyana, this is absent. The mind does not leave. It simply stands on its own, like a candle flame in a room without a single breath of air. You are not holding it. You are present. And between these two words, an abyss. Think of a time you were reading a book, a real one, a gripping one, page after page. Hours passed invisibly. You did not notice the room had darkened. You did not remember yourself. You were simply there, inside. That, at least distantly, resembles dhyana, when attention holds by itself, without a leash, without a guide. What happens inside? First, time disappears. A minute and an hour become indistinguishable, not because the mind sleeps, because it is wholly occupied with one thing, entirely, without remainder. Second, the body stops demanding. A slight itch under the shoulder blade, the kind that usually distracts you, it is gone. Not because it passed, simply no one is noticing it. Third, resistance disappears. The mind that usually fidgets, jumps, searches for something more interesting. It has stilled. Not because it surrendered, because it found what it was looking for. Only the gaze remains, and what it is directed toward. And here, the most subtle thing begins. Between the one who looks and what is being looked at, there is a distance. In ordinary attention, this distance is vast. You, here. The object, there. In dhyana, this distance begins to close, slowly, imperceptibly, like morning mist that dissolves, not at once, but surely. The boundary between I and what I contemplate grows thin. A yogi sits before a candle flame and in some moment notices an unusual feeling. He is not outside the fire. He is in it, or the fire is in him. The difference no longer matters. There is still the word I. There is still the word fire. But between them, no longer a wall. Already, almost air. This is not yet samadhi. Patanjali is clear. This is the antechamber, the last room in the corridor, the one that still has walls. The next one will not. It is important to understand dhyana does not happen by decision. You cannot switch it on in the morning by saying to yourself, "Today I will meditate," and have it occur. You can only say, "Today I will sit. I will prepare the space. I will prepare the mind. I will begin with dharana, and dhyana will come on its own, if it comes. Like sleep comes. You lie down, close your eyes, still the body. But the actual moment of crossing, that is not yours. Patanjali says this without any decoration. He does not describe what it is like to experience dhyana. No joy, no visions, no voices. Only one word, continuity, tatra. There, pratyaya, content of consciousness, ekatanata, uninterrupted flow. That is all. Perhaps in this silence is the most precise description, because dhyana is not the experience of something vivid. It is the experience of an unbroken quality, a silence that lasts, a flow that does not interrupt, oil flowing without a single bubble. The modern word meditation carries too much with it. Relaxation, visualization, breathing work, a guided journey. All of this is useful, but it is not what Patanjali means. For him, meditation is dhyana, only that. An uninterrupted, one-pointed stream of consciousness, without effort, without break, like oil flowing from one vessel into another. You are lying now, breathing quietly. Thoughts arise and pass. You are not holding any of them, simply letting them flow. Perhaps right now, just a little, you understand what it is not to fight, not to hold, not to return, simply to be with what is, even, quietly, like a stream. The oil flows unbroken. The boundary between I and the object grows thinner, and when it thins to its very end, what happens is something for which Patanjali has a special word, the last, the eighth, samadhi. There are rivers that remember themselves. They have a name, banks, a current. They know where they came from. But the closer to the sea, the wider the banks grow. The current slows. The name becomes unnecessary. And then the river enters the sea, and it is gone. There is only salt water, which no longer knows it was once a river. That is what happens in samadhi. Not a loss, not an end. Dissolution into what was always here. The eighth step of the Ashtanga Yoga, and at the same time no longer a step, because steps lead somewhere, and samadhi is not somewhere. It is what opens when you stop walking. Patanjali describes it with care. His words, tad eva artha matra nirbhasam svarupa shunyam eva samadhi. Roughly, when only the object remains, as if the observer has lost its own form, that is samadhi. When the I that was watching has dissolved, only the light that was being watched remains. In dhyana, in the meditation we spoke of, There were two, the seer and the seen, a fine line between them. In samadhi, that line disappears. The seer and the seen become one, not forced together. It simply turns out they were always one. Imagine a candle in a dark room. You look at the flame for a long time, a very long time, until you dissolve into its light, until there is no longer you watching the light. There is only the light itself. That is what Patanjali is trying to describe. Patanjali distinguishes kinds of samadhi, two broad classes. The first is sabija samadhi, with seed, samadhi with a support. In this state, there is still an object, still something around which the mind is concentrated. This class includes several levels. Vitarka, when the mind dissolves into a gross, tangible object. Vichara, when the object becomes subtler, almost without body, and the mind sinks into its essence. Ananda, when the object dissolves, but bliss remains, like a fragrance that lingers after a flower has been carried away. And asmita, the experience of pure I am, without any admixture, without name, without body, without thought, simply am. All of this is called savikalpa samadhi, samadhi with discernment. The mind still divides subtly, still remembers what was and what has become. The second class is nirbija samadhi, without seed, without object, without support, without discernment. Nirvikalpa. Here, even the I am dissolves. What remains is something for which there is no word. Patanjali calls this kaivalya. The word kaivalya is translated as aloneness, but not the kind of aloneness that aches. Something different. In Sanskrit, kevala means only. Kaivalya, when only what truly is remains. Only the nature of the seer, pure, unclouded, untouched by a single wave from all those that rose on the surface of the mind. Not emptiness, fullness. A fullness so complete there is no room in it for anything superfluous. Patanjali speaks about this state with care and honesty. He does not promise that one can enter it and stay. One cannot. One can enter and return. and each such entry changes something in the one who returned. Gradually, the intervals between entries also change. Life shifts from within, not because you are trying, because something is known that cannot be unknowed. Here, it is worth pausing to remember the third pada, the third part of the Sutras, Vibhuti-pada, about powers, about what arises on the path of samadhi. Patanjali lists them, around 20 abilities. A yogi who has reached deep samadhi may know the past and future, may enter other bodies, may make himself as small as an atom, may become invisible, may know the language of all living beings, may remember past lives. This sounds like legend, but Patanjali speaks of it calmly, as a side effect of deep practice. And immediately, his warning, quiet but firm. He says, all of this is an obstacle, the most subtle, the most seductive, the final temptation before the final door. A yogi who accepted the powers has lost the goal. They stopped at doors that shone with light, but did not open the main door, because the main door does not shine. It looks like emptiness, like dissolution, like the end of who you believed yourself to be. Kaivalya is not an acquisition. Kaivalya is a releasing. When everything has been released, not only suffering, not only the kleshas, but power and knowledge and yoga itself. Everything. The seer recognizes himself. And this recognition requires nothing, not even himself. Perhaps this sounds like an ending, but Patanjali says otherwise. It is a return to the beginning, to what existed before the first fluctuation, before the first thought, before the first I. Think of it this way. Take a vessel of water from a river. Carry it far, for a long time. Through years of practice, through 8 gates. And then, lower the vessel into the sea. The water has returned. It never truly went away. It was only separated. The form of the vessel, that is the mind. The water is what is inside. The sea is what it always was. Patanjali ends his sutras quietly. The last verse speaks of the powers of the mind returning to their source, and of the eternal silence of the seer. he writes this and goes quiet, because the next word would already be unnecessary. 8 doors, 8 gates. Behind the last one, nothing. And this nothing is not emptiness. It is a fullness without boundary. Patanjali describes it in his final verse, but he himself falls silent, because it cannot be described. It can only one day be felt, as the banks widen, and the river remembers the sea. Fullness without boundary, not emptiness, but something larger than any word. Patanjali put down his pen and fell silent, a sage who knew how to be quiet more than he knew how to speak. The path continues into the foothills. Dusk descends slowly, like cloth someone is gently smoothing over the earth. The air smells of resin and wet stone. Somewhere in the distance, perhaps past the next bend, perhaps past the next ridge, a fire is burning, small, warm. You cannot see it, but you can feel it. The traveler has walked a long way. They have passed through 8 descriptions, 8 images, 8 open doors. The legs are tired, not from weakness, from the path. And the path was real. Beneath an old tree at the edge of the trail, soft grass. The roots form something like a cradle. You lie down there. The back feels the earth, warm, solid, alive. The canopy above does not let the stars come close, only their shimmer through the leaves, as if the sky is breathing. And here, there is nowhere to go, not tonight. We do not need to pass through all 8 gates in one evening. No one expects it. Not Patanjali, who himself said, long, without interruption. Not the path, which is going nowhere. Not the sky above the tree's canopy. The first 2 steps, Yamas and Niyamas, are already here. Not to lie, not to take what is not needed, to be content with what is. Right now, lying in the dark, you can choose not to wish to be somewhere else. That is santosha, contentment. That is yoga, in a larger sense than any studio with mirrors and mats. The 3rd step, asana. Patanjali said almost nothing about it. Steady and comfortable, Sthira Sukham, a posture in which you can remain for a long time without noticing the body. Feel how you are lying right now. The back is supported. The legs are stretched. Nothing is pressing. This is Patanjali's asana, already complete. The fourth step, pranayama. The breath has already slowed on its own, not because you controlled it. Simply, the body knows. It is allowed. The inhale a little deeper, the exhale a little longer, the pause between them, quiet, like the silence between two waves. No need to stretch it. It is already there. The fifth step, pratyahara. Close the windows, at least one. The sounds outside, let them be. But you are no longer following them. A car passed, you noticed and released. Someone speaks somewhere in the distance. The words do not catch. The room grows dark. You are inside. The windows are closed. Thoughts still come. That is normal. Dharana, the sixth step, does not ask for there to be no thoughts. It offers only one thing: return. A breath in, and you are here. You drifted somewhere, and back here again. The breath is the simplest anchor, the closest. It is always with you. It never ends. Return again and again, without weariness, without judgment, simply returned. Dhyana comes on its own. This is the seventh step, and it cannot be done. It can only be allowed. When the returnings grow fewer, when the breath flows without break, like oil from one vessel into another, when the boundary between the one who observes and the breath itself begins to dissolve, then it comes. The eighth step, samadhi, need not be sought. It comes on its own when its time comes. The way dawn comes on its own. You do not hurry the dawn. You simply do not prevent the night from becoming what it must become. Patanjali did not promise a quick path. He wrote in Sanskrit, Dirgha Kala Nairantarya Satkara Asevita Dridha Bhumi. Long without interruption, with reverence, that is how practice becomes firm. 3 words. Long without interruption, with reverence. Not 3 conditions, 3 qualities of one breath. Perhaps somewhere in you there is a small fire that you have never extinguished, quiet, unobtrusive, continuing while you sleep, while you live, while you forget about it. Ishvara pranidhana, surrender to what is greater than you, one of the Niyamas. Patanjali says, through this one thing alone, samadhi can be reached. For those who have grown tired of effort, simply let go, simply surrender to what knows more. About the path of Ishvara, about bhakti, about how love becomes the way, that is a different story. Another evening, another trail branching off in another direction from this tree. There is also another path for those who wish to fall asleep with awareness, not simply dissolve into the dark, but enter sleep with a clear mind. This is Yoga Nidra, the yoga of sleep, not what Patanjali described, something quite separate, but also ancient, also real. The yoga of Patanjali is only one of many roads through this forest. Another is Hatha, the path through the body, where the body becomes a temple and every posture a prayer, where the physical leads to the subtle, where muscles open into pranic currents. There will be a separate story about that, a separate night. But for now, this night, this tree, this grass beneath your back. The mind may not stop entirely. Most likely, it will not. Tonight, it does not need to, but already quieter. The fluctuations already smaller than at the beginning of the evening. The surface of the lake still trembling, but no longer from wind, only from the last echoes of the day. The mirror is restoring itself. And this is already a beginning. Already yoga. 3 words of Patanjali live in the dark beside you. Long, without interruption, with reverence, not as a rule, as a breath. Sleep well. May Patanjali, the one whose name means fallen into folded palms, watch over you, the one who gave us 8 keys. And next time, we will travel another road, about a path where the body becomes a temple, and the temple becomes a door, about Hatha Yoga, the path through the body. But that will come later. For now, only silence and sleep.